Okay, gents, why don't we get started? So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We know you're very busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we hope you'll find this session to be informative and interesting. I'm David Ronald, Director of Product Marketing at TigerGraph, and I have the pleasure of introducing Nick Deveney, Director of Consulting and Emerging Technologies at Eden Smith. As Director of Consulting and Emerging Technologies, Nick helps businesses drive value and insight through data-enabled emerging technologies. Advancements in connectivity and smart systems are driving emerging technologies and creating tomorrow's intelligent world. These new technologies are providing businesses with an opportunity to adapt the way they interact and serve their customers. Eden Smith's unique services of consulting, staffing, and education support you in building your solutions and workforce for emerging technology projects. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. That's a very good introduction. I like that one.
Thank you. And I'm also delighted to introduce Chris George, Director of EMEA Channel Alliances and Partnerships at TigerGraph. Chris has worked in the data and analytics industry for 14 years and joined TigerGraph to build and run our partnership programs and network across EMEA. Chris has worked for both software vendors and consultancy companies across the industry and has worked with customers to deliver data insight projects across most specialties, from financial reporting to marketing analytics and everything in between.
Thank you.
With almost a decade and a half in the industry, Chris has seen the impact effective data solutions can have on organizations and has a real passion for bringing innovative solutions to the market. Graph analytics is the most significant development he has seen in this space and believes it to be a truly transformative technology for our customers and our partners. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, David.
So before we get rolling, just a few housekeeping issues. Your phones are muted, of course, but please don't take that as any indication that we don't want to hear from you. It's quite the reverse. We'd like this session to be as interactive as possible. Submit your questions and we'll do our very best to answer all of them live. If we're not able to get to all of your questions, we will follow up with you after the event with an email. And we're also going to send out the recording from this session. That usually happens within a couple of hours. We don't want to overcommit, but 2 to 3 hours after the event, we'll send an email with the link to the recording, and we'll also have that archived on our website in case you want to revisit something or share with a colleague. And then last but not least, if you do have any technical issues, contact us using the chat, and we'll do our very best to resolve those issues in a timely manner. So, Nick, I think not everybody in the audience will be familiar with Eden Smith. Please introduce us to the company.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's really good. Thank you for having us on with TigerGraph, and thank you everyone for joining. Again, appreciate your time. So Eden Smith, we're a data staffing and consulting organisation. So we're about 5 years in at the moment into our organisation, and when we set up with the idea of providing a recruitment staffing service niche to the data industry. We saw it as a very growing industry at the time, if you go back 5 years, and lots of confusion around what the roles were, what the skills were, and a very big talent shortage. So with experience through building and kind of growing teams across the globe in emerging technologies, we set out with that staffing piece in focus. Very quickly have built up a very successful practice around helping companies build out their talent teams and find the correct data professionals. That in turn kind of led to us developing and growing out a consultancy division, which actually supports customers in actually gaining value from their data, really kind of helping them in how do they build data cultures, what technologies can they try to implement to get the most value from the data, and how do you kind of go about building enterprise and global practices using a combination of processes, people and technology. Very much the consultancy side, we've always come at it from a staffing and a people perspective. So how do you grow your current teams? How do you think about knowledge transfer? and how do you think about the kind of skills that are useful and products that are relatable to your organization while trying to push in innovation. And then finally, we like to give back to the market. We like to help the industry. So we launched a education and training program. The main part of this is a program we called Nurture, where we work with universities, and we've got quite a strong partnership with Salford University in the UK, where we actually take their master graduate data science students, and as part of their dissertation, provide them with real life experiences within our customer base to prototype, to write theses and actually produce data science products on behalf of our customers. So that's a chance for them to get real life experience, get involved in a real life project for a business, creating business value, and for businesses to nurture young talent, as well as kind of get kind of insight and innovate through the data science practices. So together, these three organizational parts of our organization work together in tandem to provide a true kind of customer experience that means we can adjust and adapt our model and our service offering to be able to make sure you're getting the best value for the journey that you're on for becoming data enabled. So yeah, thank you for having us, and that's kind of the approach we take and the what we have as an organization, the services we provide. So we're working globally at the moment with some big names, big corporate brands, as well as supporting startups.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very interesting, very thorough introduction. So another question for you, Nick. How has the practice of data and analytics changed in the past, say, 5 years? And how do you predict things will change in the next 5 or so years?
Yeah, I think that we've got 5 years for the data industry has been very rapid growth. We had lots of technology changes. We've had lots of interest pull through. The whole idea of I hate to say the cliche, but the sexiest job titles with all the kind of newest technologies. There was a real big movement to data analytics, and particularly around data science. And I think for the first couple of years, we saw this peak of data science interest before a lot of organizations started to realize that they were missing the core fundamentals of data, there's data literacy and maturity, things around their technologies and their databases weren't mature enough. Things like the skills internally in their teams weren't strong enough. They didn't, their data quality wasn't good enough. They didn't have enough data governance and management. And so saw a lot of data science projects not create a return on value. And now I think we're at a bit of a maturity where a lot of organizations are starting to understand how we take advantage of our data to really produce reasonable value, and how we need to go about it in the correct manner to be able to create those data products. However, I think a chunk of the market moved in that direction. There's probably a mass part of the market that's still earlier in that journey, that they've suddenly, seen the reasons why data is valuable. I think this last year, everyone's been asking for more data, more insights, and to be able to help their organizations in really surviving and thriving in the current climates. So I think there's still a lot of people that need help out there, and talent is still very difficult to find.
Interesting. So are there misconceptions that people have about this industry and how you staff it? And if so, what are some of the common misconceptions?
Yeah, I think from a staffing perspective, you have this misconception that it's all IT, because we're dealing with technologies here, we're dealing with people that do programming, we're dealing, it's very similar. However, I think, and if I go back to pre-consulting days and go back to my staffing days, I think when you're in IT and you take a Java developer, it's very easy to understand what skills a Java developer may need or have to have in order to perform a role. The minute you move into the data industry, a data engineer, a data scientist, and a data architect may all have the same exact set of skills and you work with the same exact products. It's about the approaches they take in the day-to-day of how they're working with it and some of their surrounding knowledge that then really defines their roles and how they use data. So I think it's become very difficult for organizations to really get to grips and understand where people fit and what the roles are. And then go on top of that, the talent shortage, and all of a sudden people are, making up fancy titles, data whisperers, ninjas, whatever it may be, to try and attract people. So I think what they don't realize, or the misconception, is that actually it's not all smoke and mirrors, or there's not this kind of vast space of unknown technologies and unknown skills, that actually a lot of it is deep embedded in some of the skills and technologies we already have, and we can actually look for mobility and upskilling and actually adjust what we're looking for to be able to secure talent and grow talent into these opportunities, into these roles. Because we all work with data on a day-to-day basis. We've all been doing it for years. It's just about how we apply it.
That's a very good point. I like that the word you used here, upskilling. Frankly, I haven't heard that phrase before, but yeah, I think it very aptly touches on what you were just saying, that you want to take people who have the skill sets and enhance them so their value to the company continues or indeed increases. So Chris, let's give Nick a break, because Nick's been doing all the talking. And we heard from your bio that you have a long, history, over a decade in the data and analytics space. So is what you're hearing from Nick, does that align well with your own observations about trends and misconceptions and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, data science is obviously a very attractive and fast-growing career option, but it's not a silver bullet. And as Nick said, I think companies are realizing that actually there's an underpinning of tools and technology and attitudes and skills that need to all come together in order to get the insights from data that data science promises, in order to give that return on investment and drive organizations forward. So yeah, and we've seen I think over, let's say, best part of 15 years in the analytics space, and seen this huge change of when I started, it was business intelligence, and what people meant by that was a dashboard sitting on top of an Excel report, and that's grown so dramatically now. And we've gone through the evolutions of data visualization, structured and unstructured data, big data, into machine learning, into AI. But I mean, the reality is what's always kind of underpinned that, and it might not necessarily have been by that name, but what we now understand as a data scientist, and that is someone who is curious about data, someone who wants to understand more about what's going on, and then is able to take that data and tell a story about it, so a business can understand what's happening, what they've got, and what they've got to do in order to get to where they're at, or where they want to be at, rather.
Yeah, great. So Nick, Eden Smith decided to build a people graph.
Yeah,
what was the primary challenge the company was facing, and how does a people graph address that challenge?
Yeah, so we started investigating and looking into graph databases quite a while ago now, and we've spoke to TigerGraph and the likes for quite some time, and I think one of the things we saw in, let's say, the staffing industry, but also within our customers, was this understanding on needing to really get to grips with the multitude and complexities of people and relationships, to understand who does have either the skills, the background, the experience, or even the kind of curiosities to actually fall and fill those talent gaps. So quite often, if you look at, whether you're looking at consulting, staffing, education, we're talking about people, right? And people are complex, really complex kind of beings, and how we work and how we think and how we grow and the jobs we do. So for us, when we started to think about how can we tap into some of the value that we have as an organization about people and their skills and who has the right kind of foundations to upskill or to mobilize and to become data professionals, we just didn't know where to start. And I don't know if you want to click through on on the slides, David, and you're gonna have to do a bit of clicking here, and I'll kind of drive you. But if you just click once, there we go. So you start with a person, and then you kind of think, right, that person has certain certifications or education backgrounds, and if you keep clicking, David, we've got they've then also got certain different jobs that they've done in their lifetime of different job titles, and both of those have created different skills that they have. Keep going, there's more to it. So they've worked at certain companies, and some of them have worked at companies where, and we can stop there for the moment, some of them worked at companies where they've then worked for one company on another project with another company, or through a consultancy. So they've kind of been at one company, another company. They've also then worked with lots of people at those different companies on different projects that all then have different skills that they've then picked up. If we keep clicking, David, and those skills, they've got skills they want to learn. So you start to create all these kind of relationships and different pathways that allow you to try and to understand, whether this person is going to be a good data professional, or whether they want to be a good data professional, fits the right model. And obviously, not only have you got that individual's kind of connections, but each of the companies that they've worked at, and each of the persons they've worked with, and the job titles they have and the skills they have, all then have their own connections as well. If we click again, and we suddenly get all these secondary connections around what companies' skills look for, certain companies that they hire for, certain certifications they look for. And if we press it one more time, we also then have those people that have worked at those companies, what job titles they have, what certifications they have, and what skills they have, and what other companies they've worked at. So it starts to get really complex really quick. And if you're trying to put this into a traditional relational database, it becomes a very big, complex model that I don't think a star schema works, because you start to go around loop upon loop upon loop, and then it makes your analytics even more difficult. So one of the things we kind of asked ourselves is, how can we take all of this, and how can we, if we do one more click, how can we say, find me someone else like, oh, sorry, if we go back a stage, that's fine. How can we find someone else like this individual? So company X has hired a data scientist. How do we find more data scientists or people that could be data scientists? So the thing we loved about Graph, and we can go on to the next stage here, David, is that we were able to visually build that relationship from a business context and not a technology concept. It wasn't about data models and tables and how they relate. It was about sitting and workshopping on what are the entities, like a person, a job title, a company, and then what are the vertexes between them. So worked at, worked as, hires, has these skills. And we were able to kind of map out this complex graph in the Graph Studio with using a graph database. And then from, even starting out from one data set that was about someone's work history, map that to multiple points within that graph, rather than having multiple tables that we needed to split out. So it sped up our ability to take a complex problem, take complex relationships, and then apply the data we have to that to understand and uncover value. And you can see there we've got not just the Graph Studio with the part of the schema, but actually the different kind of attributes that we apply to that. And if you go one more step, David, I think we've got is then me and Chris have had a few conversations, and Chris, I know you say this about the whole ball and line graphs that can come out of graph analytics, and how they look and how they feel. But obviously, to show you guys some of the initial out the box, few seconds of what we were able to do, is we could take a job title like BI developer and instantly see all of the connections about which companies hire a BI developer, who's worked as a BI developer. And that's just like the first hop, as they call it in graph database. That's the first link, first relationship. We could then take one of those individuals that's been a BI developer in the top right hand there and say, okay, this individual, what other job titles have they had? And then we've got a second hop. And then from there, we can start to build an understanding of if someone is a certain, or has worked with certain job titles, it's likely they will have the skills to be a BI developer, and therefore a potential candidate for internal mobilization or internal upskilling, rather than going out to recruit. Or if we do go out to recruit, this company also hires this type of people, or that person's worked for these companies, and then we've got a kind of a target market to go through of similar companies that would have the right kind of experience that a company's looking for. So it really starts to take a complex graph model or complex relationship model and allow us to map it and provide it as a service to be able to uncover that talent and try and create a cheaper, faster process that's more effective for clients through staffing, but also through internal mobilization and internal, I suppose, upskilling.
This is fantastic. So you're able to drill into one individual. That's what we're seeing in the upper right here. We get familiar with their skill sets, what they've done in the past, and then we're able to match within the people graph that you've built, match that person to other people in the database, and then be able to project what their career path could be, or what skill they might need in order to facilitate that next step, and things of that nature. There's some sort of pattern matching and some sort of predictive ability or ability to identify gaps in his or her knowledge.
Yeah, I think what we're looking here is this is just visually exploring the graph database and seeing some of the insights that we can get through an instant from that. But the graph database is a database technology, and this is a Visual Studio that sits across it. I think the real power comes from the analytics and being able to not as a human have to click through and touch on every one of these kind of these touch points, but actually build models and predictive models and similarity models that then start to produce top 10 rankings, top 20 rankings, that if we put in a certain individual at a certain company who in our database is similar to them based on their history and their skills and their employment, and therefore would be a candidate. Or if we go to an organization and we do this within an organization, who else in your organization could be forming part of your data team that you can, really encourage? They've already got the business knowledge. They've already got half of the skills needed for domain knowledge. Now we just need to teach them X, Y, and Z to make them a data professional in your organization. And it's that advanced analytics of that machine learning capability of analyzing each of these hops and those similarities that gives us the real kind of value, I think, not me clicking through a few ball and spokes. And I see Chris laughing because we've had this conversation before, and how big can this get? The graph database can get huge.
So on that point then, to that point, how I'm just curious, how big is this graph in terms of either total data capacity or the number of vertices, the number of edges? If I'm truly honest, I probably don't actually know at this moment in time of how big it's got now. We do regular refreshes, we do regular remodels, and it's still still really innovative for us in terms of some of the insights we're gaining from it. And it's because of that business minded logic that you can apply to the schema. It's kind of how big can you make it? I don't know, Chris, how big can I go?
Well, I mean, as you say, it's highly scalable, and you can always add more processing capabilities. So we do have some customers putting through sort of 10, 20, 30 plus terabytes of data for real-time analytics at any one point. So we have like the world's largest mobile phone network running and monitoring every single telephone call that happens on their network via the system. So look, nothing's infinite. Everything has limits, but it's highly unlikely that a business is going to come into any kind of sizing issues.
Cool. And can you, Nick, can you share any insights on the sources, the data sources that you're pulling your data into the graph from?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this is our internal data. So it's CRM data based on relationships that we've built, people that we represent, that we actively are supporting in finding them the best opportunities. There are some additional external sources that are things like public postings of job adverts and vacancies there and the skills that come from them. So there's kind of, I suppose, companies that provide that as packaged in, and we can say, okay, well, you know, I think it's no surprise that Lloyd's Banking Group they hire many different people, but you know, when Lloyd's Banking Group post a job ad on their website for a BI developer, then actually, you know, we get a copy of that and can pick up the skills that they're looking for. So it's not just, I suppose, for the organizations and the mobilization, but actually as a service on our recruitment side, we're able to find active opportunities for individuals a lot faster that better match into, you know, their needs, but also not directly matching. I think there's a statistic about gender equality, and when different genders look at job descriptions, they have to feel a different level of confidence about whether they match certain criteria on the job description or not, whether they apply or not. You know, with this kind of analytics, you can be like, well, look, we know that you're potentially, this is a good opportunity for you because you've got this history, you know, because you've got these skills, which also, you know, translate into these skills. You've worked at similar companies, and providing that kind of stuff. So I think that it's a number of different sources, mainly our own internal data, and that's, you know, why it's all anonymized, and I'm not showing full parts of the graph and can't tell you how big it is, but certainly it's internal plus then external sources have been brought in as well. But like I said, it's not just a complex, you know, 20, 30, 40 different tables that get huge. This is the initial pilot for this started off one single data set that populated all of those vertices and entities.
Fantastic. Okay, I think at this point we'd like to have a poll, and the question. What happened?
Sorry, just before you go into that, David, we had a question come in on the system. Are we thinking about making an individual's graph available to themselves? I think my CEO Jez is on the call. It's something we're discussing and talking about. We do think, obviously, you know, the data owners are the data subjects themselves, that they own that data, they should have access to that data, and it is it's an interesting service that allows them in terms of their job search or their career paths. I don't think we're at a product development stage yet that we could go out and offer that, but certainly it's one for the roadmap.
Okay.
Hope that answers your question, Mike.
We'll find out. Okay, great. Let's go to a poll. And the question is, which of the following is most important to you and your business? So we'll just take a minute or two to collect the responses. While we're waiting, so shifting gears a little, Nick, so obviously this has been very successful, but if you were starting over, what might you do differently? Might you have done differently?
I think for me, I'm a very hands-on person. I kind of said to Chris and the team, look, let me get access on the free tier, let me jump in and start playing around with it. And I probably wasted a lot of time playing around with just playing around trying to work things out of what was right. I mean, it's quite intuitive once you get into it, but trying to work things out myself, that meant I probably came back a few times and said, oh, how do I do this? Or I want to do this, or why is this happening? And quite often Chris was like, have you gone through our free academy? Have you gone through the videos? It's like, no, Chris, I don't want to sit through them. I'm hands-on. I've told you this. And they are interactive. So if I started again, I'd probably done the tutorials and the demos first, but yeah, I was more eager to start exploring my own data, and that's just the nature of me, I suppose. But certainly, yeah, to take the help that TigerGraph had available to probably fast track my my development.
All right, cool. Well, let's look at these poll results. So almost half our audience identified that the most important is retaining top talent. Second largest portion was enabling employees to retrain as needed, which is really sort of the theme, one of the themes of this webinar. So that's great. And then right now there's an even split between recruiting high skill applicants. Oh, no, there's been a change. So so keeping employees engaged and productive has now tied for second place with enabling employees to retrain as needed. So Chris, again, we'll give Nick a break from doing all the talking. How do these Anything in these results that surprise you, or do they underscore what you came into the webinar thinking?
No, I think they underscore it. And I think, yeah, coming in top is retaining top talent. That's always a major concern or goal of any organization. And we're not just talking data science here, we're talking like every member of staff. So every good company knows that their team is their biggest asset. So you want to retain that top talent. And to do that, you actually do kind of want to feed into some of these other points. So I think part of retaining top talent is actually enabling employees to retain to retrain as needed. You know, a top talent data analyst will probably actually have much of the skill set needed to also be a top talented data scientist. A great programmer might just need a little bit of tweaking to become a great data engineer. So, you know, that's a hugely powerful thing. And equally, again, keeping employees engaged and productive. If you've got someone who is in your marketing team that actually loves the technology so much, they want to go deeper, and you know, they want to retrain and actually become an analyst or a data scientist or a data engineer, then yeah, why wouldn't you want to encourage that and build on that? So yeah, I think that really does underscore what I've seen in the market. Are you on mute, David?
Nick, anything surprising to you, or again, does this align with what you would have thought?
Again, it's that element of it takes time, effort, and money to you know, attract the best people for our organizations. And once you find those that meet your culture, meet your drive, and are engaged with your business, it's about keeping them there. And like I said, half of the challenge with data and data science is business domain knowledge. It's knowing those use cases, understanding the business challenges, and then thinking logically and through creatively, how can we solve that with data, or you know, a combination of data, technologies, and our processes, and our communities. So I think the upskilling people, you know, retaining people, definitely the ones need to be there. And I think that's and again, coming back to, you know, Mike's point, for us, this product is not really, or the kind of development we're doing, innovation we're doing, is not really about can we find people quicker for our customers. Obviously, that's apart from customers that are hiring, but actually, how do we help individuals that want to be data professionals, that want to be part of this market, continually keep upskilled, continually, you know, learn what opportunities are available to them, and how do they see that their career path grow. And an organization that's willing and happy to provide that to their employees, is not scared of employees learning new skills, will succeed and feel the benefits from that.
Okay, good. Thank you. And thanks to the audience for participating in that poll. So let's move on. Chris, just give, for people in the audience who are less familiar with Graph and all the opportunities and potential of Graph, just talk to us about what is Graph Analytics, how does the Graph database enable analytics, and in addition to staffing, what are some of the other popular uses for a Graph database, Graph Analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're all quite familiar with the challenges in the data and analytics space. So, you know, volume of data is a huge one. I think if memory serves me correctly, the statistic I saw was back in 1995, we were dealing with something like 250 million terabytes of data in the world from a business perspective, and today we're dealing with something like 14 or 140, maybe even a trillion terabytes. So it's just a huge amount of volume of data that we're now dealing with, and that's also from a very complex data landscape. You know, we don't live in a rows and column world anymore. Most data that businesses were working with 20 years ago was, you know, very tabular. It was, you know, it was our profit and loss reports. It was sales ledgers and so forth. And yet now we are dealing with a world where so much information is coming through us from social media. There's, you know, text-based communication tools where organizations are talking such as you know, data bots and Twitter, where you're having direct communication through your customers, but it's not simply a click a box kind of scenario. So there's a huge complex data landscape of how we're getting data and also the tools to process those. You know, we live in a world where the vast majority of our customers and organizations we work with will probably, you know, have like 10 plus different types of database in their system. So it's a real mismatch of data sources which really aren't designed to talk to each other. And various tools that can drill down on some and not on others. So really complex data world we're kind of living in. And it's a very dynamic data world as well. There's always more data coming through. You know, when I started as a wee young man 14 years ago in this space, when people were talking about real-time processing, they literally meant they were going to hit the button to process it twice a day. Their definition of real time was, you know, 8-hour windows. Now we talk about real time and people are like 8 seconds is far too long. Everything changes. It's a really dynamic, ever-changing nature of the data landscape, and real-time processing, particularly for a lot of core graph use cases, means real time. Like it doesn't even mean a second or two. It means instantaneous, and that's what you're really dealing with. And you're doing all of this to actually get meaningful and actionable insights. There's no point doing all this in-depth data science, understanding everything about it, if then the business isn't able to carry that forward and make positive change. So that's kind of the data and analytics space. So where TigerGraph or graph analytics works is it's a fabric that underpins that. It's designed to deal with huge quantities of various types of data. It's designed and it's structured, it's architectured in a way that real-time processing means real-time. We have some customers in the financial crime space, preventing, not committing, where they're you know, using TigerGraph to get real-time analytics in you know, 0.0007 of a second. You know, that's hugely powerful stuff. It's hugely complex as well, because as Nick's graph showed, if you're looking at a person, their network grows very quickly, very easily when you factor in connections with universities, work, school, family, etc. Imagine doing that on a corporate scale. Let's say you're one of our other clients, Jaguar Land Rover, and you're looking at your graph of a car for the parts. Now, we would sit here as a non-car manufacturer and think, well, how difficult can that be? You've got wheels and tires and etc. How many parts can that possibly be? Well, the answer on an average Land Rover, I think, I'm not that close, but I think it's something like 38,000 different multitudes of parts, all coming from in excess of 100 different suppliers, and they're using TigerGraph to monitor that entire supply chain. So it's designed for that whole complexity. It's designed to talk to multiple different types of data sources, and so that's where TigerGraph Grip really comes in. Then Nick actually asked me a question earlier on about, well, you know, how big can you go with TigerGraph? My response was, if you recall, that we have customers using 10, 20, 30 plus terabytes of data at any one time for real world analytics. And you can always add more processing power. That ultimately comes down to how big your graph you can do is how much processing power you can put to it. And frankly, when we live in a cloud world where you're actually using the processing power of Amazon or GCP, then you don't really have that much restrictions. But I think what often gets overlooked isn't the size of your graph and the size of those data sets. It's actually the complexity of that data. And it's, as Nick said about the hops, and that's what we talk about when we're talking about complexity, is how many links between various data sources. It's complexity of that data that is so challenging for, say, a relational database to monitor and to find those connections in. So we have one customer, for example, who's actually got a very small data set. It's only a couple of gigs of data, but it's an incredibly complex data set where they're having to monitor a lot of external data source from their suppliers. And they're in the agriculture business, and again, you think, well, how advanced could that possibly be, and how difficult? Well, the fact is they're managing a global supply chain where they're monitoring everything from when a crop is picked in South America to it appearing in a product on a shelf in your local supermarket. Now, they actually only control a small fraction of that, and most of that is other people having to feed their data, their suppliers in the farming business, their customers in retail, their logistics firms, and so forth. But it's such a complex area. I mean, an average single product has in excess of 150 different hops on that data source, and they need to monitor that in real time for compliance and auditing purposes. Because to be frank, they need to show that there's no child labor and no exploitation used in that net at all. So any one time, the government, either the UK, EU, US, etc., can knock on their door and demand to see instantly that complete transaction, a transparent flow of data. And it's just an incredibly complex solution that can't be done in a tabular form. So I think that's where that's something that often gets overlooked. People talk about scale of graph. I mean, complexity is as important a factor as well that people really need to be aware of.
Sounds great. That's awesome. Thanks. So gents, for some technical reason, I'm unable to see the questions. I know, have we addressed all of the questions that have been submitted? There were a few.
I believe so. I believe we had Mike. So I think we've had Mukesh asked whether the session's been recorded. Obviously said yes, and would it be shared? I've chose David will share it.
I think David said right at the offset that this will be shared hopefully within a few hours. Yeah. So,
okay,
so
sounds good.
Mike, I've already answered, and then as I put in the chat, Jez said, we'll definitely be using graph solution for sure, and we don't, define contacts within our network as candidates or clients in the staffing industry. They are all contacts to Eden Smith. They can be one or the other at different times in their careers, and that's why graph kind of works so well, because it's people and it's people data, and we can put the person at the center of our graph, or part of our graph, whereas traditional databases for the staffing industry instantly separate and create two people, one a candidate, one a client, and in our industry they're treated very differently. So our ability to say this is a contact, this is a person, and this is their relationships and their experiences and how we interact with them allows us to create that in our people graph. And I think that's all the questions and comments.
All right, cool. Yeah, no, that's a very important capability of the graph that you built out. That you're not sort of forced to bifurcate between the two profiles or the two types, the job, the candidates and the talent managers. So yeah, that's cool. I think at this point,
before we move on to the poll, you asked me a question about. Because obviously we talked about the people graph that Nick and the team at Eden Smith had developed. But yeah, you wanted to know something about other use cases. So yeah, I mean, if we go back here, you can see, you know, there's a lot of different use cases for graph. I mean, this is just a few kind of examples, you know, but the ones where we're finding in the business community, at least, there's a real uptake of interest are these three that I've highlighted. And the reason being is, to be honest, is that they're actually operational, transactional business issues which need to be solved in real time, and literally can cost or make a business tens of millions of dollars in minutes. So it's these are hugely important. So I think the ones for us that have been most picked up are Customer 360. Now again, you've got different use cases feeding into that. So in some cases, there might be customer journeys like online retailers or recommendation engines or marketing analytics and so forth, but that all kind of comes under the Customer 360. Fraud prevention is also very, very big for us, particularly in the financial services, but again, also in the online retailer space as well. Fraud is a major concern. Feeding up into that, although I've not highlighted here, you've also got within financial crime, compliance issues such as anti-money laundering and know your customer. That all kind of feeds into our financial crime offerings. And finally, and this one might be a little bit more focused for the European market. Some of my colleagues in the US might say actually they're getting more traction somewhere else, but supply chain management, and again, feeding into that is network and resource utilization. And that's like a couple of the use cases I mentioned earlier. They both technically fall under that whole supply chain, and getting that whole transparent and auditable flow of data is hugely beneficial for businesses, and something that TigerGraph really excels at.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that, Chris. All right, let's go to our second and final poll. And the question here is, what is preventing your organization from increased technology investment within your staffing program? So let's launch that.
While you launch that, David, we think we've got a couple more questions. Mike said he thinks he knows the answer, but is TigerGraph now covered on Azure yet? I thought I saw an option for Azure the other day when I logged back onto the portal. Is it there now?
Yeah, I can tell you, Mike, it is. And in fact, there's two offerings on Azure that you can have the enterprise version, or you can have the managed service version as well. So yeah.
Cool. And then Harry asked about how important is visualizing the data when it comes to a people graph. Internally, we had a conversation about this a few times, and I think some of the complexities of it and the whole ball and spoke is not that digestible by I suppose the average user. So I've been working with Chris on some of the graph visualizations and some of the kind of custom visuals that fit into packages like Power BI, Tableau, and even kind of open source technologies as well. But I think for us, it's about that analytical output and really delivering that to the end user, whether that is a top 10 or a top 20 or a list of rankings or similarity kind of scorings. It's more about the output of the analytics than it is about visualizing the graph itself and the outputs from the graph, because it does come, when you get to the complexities, it becomes very big and very a little bit harder to digest and explore.
And I'd actually kind of second that as well, and says that's not just people graph, that is graph analytics. So the way I look at it is, when it comes to graph visualization, you've got kind of 3 layers, and they roughly translate to a business unit. So that native graph visualizations, which commonly referred to as balls and sticks, that is ideal for data engineers, data scientists, people that are, to be frank, They get that visualization makes sense for them. It's logical, and that's an area they can get stuck in and they can tweak and they can drill down on. It makes perfect sense. Then you go and level up and let's focus on fraud prevention. If you're an investigator, you need to drill down on TigerGraph. You need to understand those patterns, but you need to see it in more of a workflow diagram rather than those kind of books and sticks. Or you might actually want to have those hot spots and data points showing up on a geographical map. So then we have different visualization tools you can put in for that kind of business user area, where it makes more sense for them. And then finally, you get up to the C-suite. Let's be honest, the C-suite don't want to do anything except stare at a dashboard that has everything out laid for them, because that's how they think reports work. And that's when you get into the area of where you've got the widgets that interact with something like a Power BI sitting on top of TigerGraph, and it just shows a nice straightforward bar graph or pie chart, etc., of taking really complex graph data and then visualizing it in a really kind of very straightforward analytical way for the C-suite to digest and understand fully. So you've got those kind of 3 layers of graph visualization, and you can also relate those directly to be frank, how involved in the graph someone is.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Chris. Okay, let's take a look at this poll result here. Insufficient lack of next generation technology was cited as the main reason that may be an inhibitor to people moving forward with increased technology investment. But close behind.
People who ticked on that need to talk to the TigerGraph sales team.
I thought you might say that. But close behind is the cost, perceived cost, and also IT resource limitations. So that's pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, I think I get the understanding of next gen technology, and I don't know if that's I don't know if that's kind of the tech team and things. I think in some organizations, there's a lot of understanding of the art of the possible, and they hear about these data technologies all the time, but it's about that wider awareness and understanding across the rest of the organization, which then leads into justifying the cost and the IT investment to be able to bring in some of this stuff. I think a lot of the corporates we've worked with are they're still slow moving, and they're still kind of a little bit behind on some of it. There's some that are way ahead, but I think we need to start to learn from the startups, learn from the product development organizations, and try to create some kind of model that allows us to, I hate to say fail fast, but I'd say, develop fast and then, productionize further, so that you can actually innovate and test in some of these scenarios. Now, cloud's great for that because you can spin something up for a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks to try and test something and shut it back down again. And the cost is then very small and investment small. I think some of the challenges is that it's still very hard to estimate costs on cloud. It's still there. Even when you talk to the big Microsofts, AWS and stuff like that, say, it's X amount per hour for this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And even the calculators they provide you are very complex. So I think that's probably the sticking point when it comes to some of that cost and the link to then understanding next gen technology. And it gets to a point where people say, well, what am I going to be paying for? How much it's going to cost me? And we've had horror stories. We've heard of horror stories where people have accidentally, clicked the wrong thing or started something up in a cloud technology trying to innovate, and it's cost them, thousands. And we've had others that have cost, run innovation things and gone, oh, wow, that was really, really cheap. We didn't expect that. So I think it's talking to the network, talking to, your partners, talking to the vendors, and just looking at how can we start off from this. And to be fair, with Chris, we started off with TigerGraph on a free trial. It's a free tier that it runs up, it spins up in AWS, and then if you don't touch it for like an hour, it turns off, and if you don't touch it for a week, it terminates and it kills your schema, and you need to start again. But you've got that time to really innovate and play around without putting massive investment in a big kind of infrastructure.
Yeah.
What I'd also say, adding to that, and also looking at some of these other questions, graph analytics is designed to be a collaborative, empowering technology that works within your existing ecosystem. So when you're talking about costs, a lot of the time that might be cost of ownership. A big driver for people doing graph analytics is to be able to use that to drill down much deeper, much wider, and get much more powerful insights from their existing data ecosystem. So it actually returns or increases the return on investments that the business has already made. So many much larger systems out there for very complex but very specific tasks would actually find that, you know, when the accountants sit down to it, by pairing that with graph analytics, that cost of ownership actually comes down, or you get to the return on investment 6 months, 12 months, 18 months faster than you would have alone. So there's actually, you know, one shouldn't, there's lots of ways of looking at costs, and, you know, actually tend to be that graph analytics is a very affordable and you know, quite profitable solution to be involved with for an organization. And also matching on what Nick was saying, particularly with clouds, you'd be surprised with how little time is involved in a deployment cycle. I mean, as a genuine proof of concept, you can be up and running and completed with it within a couple of weeks, in all seriousness. Particularly on cloud, but still not also reduced. Still, it's not a big labor intensity or time intensity as on-prem deployments, at least with a fairly straightforward use case. And equally, again, when I see that last point there about productivity during the transition, there very rarely is a transition, because it's more about complementing. So it's very rare that you'll be switching off a system and switching on graph analytics. What's more is you'll be plugging in graph analytics. So there is no loss of productivity in that impact. And particularly if you're talking about 50% of users, or the business users of the TigerGraph, who won't be getting involved with TigerGraph itself, will be just looking and drilling down on those visualization layers. In many cases, they're not even new visualization layers for them. They're Power BI or Tableau that's just suddenly got a few more widgets to it, and suddenly got more robust data available to them.
All right, cool. Okay, well, in the interest of time, it looks like we don't have any additional questions from the audience. So let's move forward and wrap things up. And Nick, we'll turn back to you and you know, ask, what advice would you have for others who in the audience who want to set off in a similar direction?
Yeah, like I said, for me, it's about thinking, getting started with understanding technology. We just saw, you know, people don't understand the next generation technology, so let's kind of go through some, talk to your partners, talk to your, you know, consultants, talk to people, even just engineers in the market that have used these technologies, and talk about the use cases, talk to the guys at TigerGraph and the girls at TigerGraph, and just start to gather that information and knowledge. Watch some of the kind of tutorials, watch some of the kind of case studies around it, and then just and again, it comes back to that idea of this plotting, or being able to draw out, you know, what our graph would look like. I've got a bit of paper, I've got one of my whiteboards, and literally just said, right, okay, let me just start drawing or writing out my figures from a business logic, and then take that to the guys and see how you start on that free tier, start to explore and start to drive value for the organization. There's no harm in getting started, I think.
Cool. And then Chris, what is one piece of practical advice you would give to somebody starting out?
I will be very boring and literally repeat Nick there. I'd say roll up your sleeves and crack on with it. Go to TigerGraph, you know, go to TigerGraph Academy, go through those tutorials, which Nick didn't do, and get to grips with that system. Then sign up for that the free trial. If you've got some data sets you already want to play with, and you sign up for the free tier. If you'd like to actually use the managed service and use some of the toolkits that are available, and just sort of build some visualizations and see what you can get on with it, then go to TigerGraph Cloud and sign up for that managed service. But whatever option you choose to do, just don't delay. Just get on. The sooner you start, the sooner you'll realize that actually it's not that complicated, and the insights that you can gain from it for your organization is astronomical, and you can find numerous business cases and use cases within your organization to start using Graph.
Awesome. All right, great. Thanks for that. Okay, just to wrap up, so we hope this has been an interesting and informative webinar. Here are some additional or upcoming webinars on June 3rd, a couple of weeks away. We'll have Heather Adams from Accenture talking about financial crimes and how graph databases can be used to combat them. A week after that, we'll be talking to Callum Chalmers, actually, from Capgemini, and he'll talk about using Graph for ecological initiatives. And then a week after that, we'll have Scott Heath from Experal looking at supply chain. And you can learn at any time, if you want to learn about what's next on the calendar of webinars, you can go to tigergraph.com/webinar. So with that, I think we're just a minute or two over time. I want to very sincerely thank Nick. That was awesome. Your comments were thoughtful, and I know they come from a place of deep expertise and passion. So thank you for all your great inputs. I'm sure the audience benefited tremendously. If you want to reach out to Nick, you can do so at nick.deveney@edensmith.co.uk. If you want to learn more about Edensmith company itself, you can go to edensmith.group. And again, I wanted to thank Chris for all of your editorializing and additions on to Nick's comments. That was very thoughtful. Thank you, Nick.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invite, David.
Yeah, thank you both for joining us today. If you wanted to reach Chris, you can do so at chris.george@tigergraph.com. You can reach me at david.ronald@tigergraph.com. We'd love to invite you to think about participating in our partner program. And if you are interested in doing so, you can go to tigergraph.com/partnergraph. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I know everyone in the audience is very busy, and we're touched and honored that you chose to spend the last, 62 minutes, the last 62 minutes with us. Hopefully you found this event to be interesting and informative, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Have a good day.